the ancient roots of coffee.
Let's see how this builds. According to local legend, the story of coffee kicks off in Ethiopia with a goat herder named Kaldi. He noticed his goats acting, unusually energetic after snacking on some mysterious berries. From Ethiopia, those beans made their way over to Yemen, where the port city of Mocha became this massive, bustling hub for the global coffee trade. Fast forward to the 1500s in the Ottoman Empire, and we see the very first Turkish coffeehouses opening up in Istanbul. Just imagine the sights and smells. These were some of the first places in the world where people gathered specifically to drink finely ground, unfiltered coffee, all simmered in a small pot called a zezve.
But long before those Turkish coffeehouses, coffee was, and literally still is, a deeply communal anchor in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian coffee ceremony, known as buna, isn't your quick morning drive-through. No way. It's a multi-hour shared ritual that happens in 3 distinct rounds. First up is abel, which is the strongest cup, brewed purely for pleasure. The second is tona, a more diluted brew meant for contemplation. And finally, baraka, which translates to blessing, is drank to bring good fortune. The raw green beans are roasted right over an open flame, ground by hand and brewed in a traditional clay pot called a jebena. It's an absolute sensory masterpiece meant to be shared with neighbors and guests.
Crossing over to West Africa, we find a brew that's both a daily habit and a spiritual act. This is Senegal's sacred café tuba. It's totally unique because it's brewed not just with coffee beans, but with a West African spice called grains of salim pepper, and sometimes cloves. This combo gives it a medicinal warmth and a spiced flavor that's unlike anything else in the world. It's deeply connected to the Murid Brotherhood, a large Islamic Sufi order, and is named after the holy city of Tuba. If you're ever walking around Dakar, you'll see it sold by vendors on street corners everywhere, poured piping hot straight from large thermoses.
Moving right along to Section 2, Italian Cafe Culture Classics.
Italy gave us the espresso, and from that concentrated little shot comes a true morning staple, the cappuccino. It's made of equal parts espresso, steamed milk, and milk foam. Now check this out. This brilliantly illustrates where the name actually comes from. The drink was named after the Capuchin friars, a Catholic religious order. The color of the coffee perfectly matches their brown robes, and that distinctive puffy layer of foam on top, it perfectly resembles the hoods those friars wore. In traditional Italian culture, you only drink this in the morning, since that high milk content is believed to mess with your digestion later in the day.
But what about after dinner? For that, allow me to introduce the affogato. The word literally translates to drowned in Italian, which hits the nail on the head. This is a classic dessert where a piping hot, dark shot of espresso is poured directly over a scoop of cold, sweet vanilla ice cream. Just picture yourself sitting in a piazza in Rome, watching the cold, rich ice cream slowly melting into that hot, bitter espresso, creating this perfect, creamy pool of flavor. It is, for sure, absolute sensory perfection.
Now, let's venture off the beaten path for Section 3, Quirky European Coffee Traditions.
Before we touch down at our next stop, I have to ask you, what happens when you put cheese in your coffee? I know, it sounds a bit strange at first, right? But hold that thought as we travel way up to the snowy, freezing north of Finland to find out.
Welcome to the world of Finnish coffeeost, which simply translates to coffee cheese. For centuries, the Sami people of northern Finland and Sweden have practiced this incredibly unique tradition. Basically, you take cubes of a mild cheese called juustoleipä and drop them directly into a cup of mild coffee. The cheese doesn't actually completely melt. Instead, it acts like a sponge, absorbing the coffee, softening up slightly, and taking on its flavor. So you drink the coffee first, and then you eat the cheese with a spoon. You get this surprising but amazing little squeak with every bite. I honestly couldn't believe it until I tasted it, but the subtle coffee flavor that cheese absorbs is surprisingly good.
Heading back down south to Spain, specifically Valencia, we find the Café Bombón. The name is Spanish for candy or sweet treat, and it absolutely lives up to that title. It's made with equal parts dark espresso and dense, sweetened condensed milk. What is so striking about this drink is the beautiful visual contrast. It's served in a small glass, and because the condensed milk is so heavy, it sits perfectly at the bottom. You get to just admire these 2 distinct layers, the stark dark espresso on top and the bright white sweetness below, before you finally stir the whole shebang together into a rich, dessert-like treat.
Let's pack our bags for Section 4, Asia's sweet and savory mixes.
Now, what's really interesting here is how we can see 2 completely different cultures using the exact same ingredient, eggs, to solve completely different coffee problems. On one hand, we have Vietnamese egg coffee, where egg yolks are whipped with condensed milk to create this rich custard topping. But on the flip side, we have a 19th century Scandinavian tradition where a raw egg is mixed directly into the dry grounds before boiling. In the Scandinavian method, the egg binds to the bitter compounds during cooking and floats to the top. This clarifies the brew, leaving behind a perfectly clear, smooth, and mild cup. So 2 brilliant yet completely opposite ways to use an egg. let's look a little closer at that Vietnamese egg coffee. It is, as they say, often described as liquid tiramisu, and wow, it is phenomenally decadent. The story goes that back in 1946 there was a severe shortage of fresh milk in Hanoi. A clever bartender at a local hotel needed a quick solution, so he started whipping egg yolks with sugar and condensed milk as a dairy substitute. He spooned it right over strong Vietnamese coffee, and boom, a legendary drink was born. In fact, his family still operates a cafe to serve it today.
Next up, the bustling streets of Hong Kong. Let's transport ourselves to a 1950s Cha-Cha Tang, which is a casual, fast-moving local diner. This is where Yu Young was born. The word is Mandarin for the Mandarin duck. It's a bird where the males and females look completely different, making it this beautiful cultural symbol for two unlike things paired together. In this case, those two things are coffee and creamy Hong Kong-style milk tea. It's a fast-moving, intensely caffeinated mix that served as the absolute perfect fuel for the working class in a rapidly growing city.
Our travels through Asia wouldn't be complete without looking at one of the rarest coffees in the world, Kopi Luwak. The process here is, well, definitely unique. The coffee beans are actually eaten and digested by a small animal called the Asian palm civet. During digestion, specific enzymes in the civet's stomach break down proteins in the beans, which reportedly produces a smoother, less bitter flavor. Historically, this originated during Dutch colonial rule, when local Indonesian farmers were forbidden from picking coffee for themselves, so they collected the beans the civets had left behind. Today, however, Kopi Luwak faces heavy modern criticism. High commercial demand has led to civets being kept in small cages and force-fed the coffee berries, which has sparked significant animal welfare controversies globally.
And finally, let's head to Section 5, the Americas and modern trends. Let's touch down in Mexico. Close your eyes and imagine the warming, earthy aromas of cinnamon and sweet molasses filling the air. This is coffee de olla, a traditional brew simmered in an earthy clay pot with ground coffee, cinnamon, and piloncillo, which is an unrefined brown sugar. The clay pot itself actually adds a subtle earthy quality you just can't get in a regular coffee maker. It is naturally warming and incredibly popular during beautiful cultural celebrations, especially the Day of the Dead.
Now, if you ever find yourself in Little Havana down in Miami, you have to witness the creation of a café cubano. It is a precise, high-energy, sugary ritual. You don't just dump sugar into espresso. Instead, you take the very first drops of espresso from the machine and aggressively whip them together with sugar until they turn into a thick, pale, creamy paste. Then you pour the rest of the hot espresso right over it. This creates what's called the espuma, a thick, rich, intensely sweet foam that floats perfectly on top.
Moving into the modern cafe menu, we have to settle a major distinction right now: the latte versus the flat white. A standard latte is pretty mild, using 1 part espresso to 3 or 4 parts steamed milk, topped with a small layer of foam. But the flat white, which originated in Australasia back in the 1980s, uses the exact same espresso but significantly less milk. The milk is steamed into a velvety, silky texture called microfoam with barely any froth on top. That's actually where the flat name comes from. This lower milk ratio lets the rich coffee flavor truly shine through.
Next, let's look at 2 massive modern trends that have completely reshaped how people consume caffeine. First up is bulletproof coffee, which blends brewed coffee with grass-fed butter and MCT oil. It was actually inspired by yak butter tea in Tibet, and it became a massive commercial hit for providing keto-friendly energy. On the flip side, we have nitro cold brew. This is cold brew coffee infused directly with nitrogen gas. The tiny nitrogen bubbles create a thick, sweet, creamy head, giving the coffee an amazing texture without using a single drop of dairy. It's a real game changer.
As we start to wrap up, let's look at the Americano and the Gibraltar. An Americano is simply espresso diluted with hot water. It was famously started by U.S. soldiers stationed in Italy during World War II who found the local espresso way too strong. The Gibraltar, named after the specific Libby glass it's served in, was popularized in San Francisco and cuts a shot of espresso with just enough steamed milk to round out the flavor. So the crucial point here is that both of these drinks, despite being completely different, were essentially invented to do the exact same thing: make the sharp, intense flavor of straight espresso way more approachable for American palates.
We've traveled from the ancient ceremonies of Ethiopia to the snowy, cheese-filled cups of Finland, the bustling diners of Hong Kong, and the modern cafes of the Americas. Our global tour through this explainer of coffee's source material has come to an end, but I'll leave you with this. Which passport stamp will your coffee mug collect tomorrow morning? Will you try whipping up a Cuban espuma, or maybe bravely drop some cheese into your brew? Thanks for joining me on this journey. Travel well and happy brewing.